for
You're
chapter
finally broke
3. Teacher lesson for chapter 3. Jake and Elijah, you haven't even moved to do what I've asked you twice to do.
I know, we have my pencil.
So we're going to talk about geography and about the political situation in the time of Christ's ministry in Israel. Now, this is going to be more factual than inspirational, but here's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping to give you a visual picture of this land. Has anybody been there? I tell my sophomores every year that my dream, my bucket list, which really can't be a bucket list because I'll never be able to afford it, but whatever. If you said, I'm going to pay for your dream vacation, first of all, I'd say thank you and I'd probably hug you. It would be to go to Israel and walk where Jesus walked. I just think that would be amazing, and I'm going to hopefully bring you along in this to Israel, although last year's class really was trying to figure out a way we could all go to Israel. And you know, they're pretty gung-ho, they probably would have done it. But anyway, I want to give you such a picture of Israel, and I'm going to show you some videos that I think will help, that you want to go to. And in a sense, we're taking a trip through Israel throughout this year because this is where Jesus ministered. And so I'm hoping you'll have a visual picture when, oh yeah, he was in Galilee. This is what Galilee looks like. Oh, he was at the Sea of Galilee. He was at, on the Jordan River. Give you a little picture of what that means. So this is about the geography and the political situation, but also important stuff to know. So let's talk first about the size of Israel. I'm not sure why they put Israel in the middle of the United States. I suppose to show it with, the whole, how big it is or small it is compared to the United States. I'm glad they used Nebraska. But Israel is about the size of Massachusetts and Connecticut combined. So this is Rhode Island here. So it's just this small little area. That's about the size of Israel. And it's about 390 miles long and only 30 to 80 miles wide. So not a very large country at all. But even though it is just a tiny dot on I'm going to move ahead here and show you a tiny dot on the map. There's 390 miles long and 30 to 80 miles wide. Here, we'll show you. There it is. You see it? Barely. You see the United States is highlighted as well. It's that little red strip of land. It's a little dot on the map. And yet, this is what God says through the prophet Ezekiel. Thus says the Lord God, this is Jerusalem. I have set her in the center of nations with countries all around her. And that was true. And it is true of Israel. In fact, Ezekiel in the Old Testament, at that time, it was the very center. Israel was the very center of the ancient world, surrounded by 4 different empires at different times. To the northeast, you had Assyria. To the east and southeast, you had Babylon. To the northwest, you had Asia Minor, what is now Turkey. And to the southwest, you had Egypt. And so it was surrounded by the great empires. It was really at the crossroads of its day. It was strategically located. In fact, you really couldn't get anywhere from any place to any place without going through Palestine. And many people did travel through Palestine to get to any other part of the known world. So here's what God says in Deuteronomy 7:6. For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for his treasured possession out of all of the peoples of the earth who are on the face of the earth. God, Israel, is God's treasured possession. What's interesting to me about this is that God tells you in 2 Peter that you are, 1 Peter, that you are his treasured possession. This is what it says. But you are a chosen, this is saying this about believers, followers of Christ. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. You are God's treasured possession. And just as he set Israel in a place, he has set you in a strategic place, and he has set you in a family. He has set you in a school. He has set you in a country. And he has done so for a purpose, so that you may proclaim his excellencies, because he brought you out of darkness and brought you into light. We are to have an impact for Jesus in the place where we are planted. You don't have to wait for someday to have an impact for Jesus. You can have an impact for Jesus right now, within this school. I've seen you do it. I've seen you be an impact, even just within this school. So we're going to talk about the geography. We're going to talk about the climate and the political situation. And I find it interesting. Of course, I'm a social studies teacher by trade, but I hope you will too. God has blessed this tiny little country with every imaginable climate there can be. In fact, you have snowy Mount Hermon that is over 9,000 feet above sea level. And within just 200 miles, you have the tropical Dead Sea region, which is 1,300 feet below sea level. 200 miles. You go from this to this. If we got on I-80 right now and we went 200 miles west, we're probably at Kearney, maybe closer to North Platte. I don't know. All I know is all we've seen is a bunch of farmland and cows and a few trees along the Platte. That's it. There's no variation in the climate. And yet, in 200 miles from Mount Hermon to the Dead Sea, you have a snowy mountain and a tropical climate. Those people who live in Jerusalem can leave in their car with snow on the ground in Jerusalem, go 30 miles, so not even Fremont, and get a suntan. They can go from, hang on, that's all right. Get a suntan on the beach of the Dead Sea when they left with snow on the ground. Or they can drive north less than 5 hours and go skiing on the slopes of Mount Hermon. Israel's climate is incredibly unusual for such a small country. In fact, almost every climate that can be found on the earth can be found here, except for maybe the Arctic. But pretty much everything else can be found in this small area of Israel. They also have a very varied geography. The Mediterranean Sea is about a few miles apart from 3,000 foot mountains. You've got beautiful lush green valleys that are dotted with flowering shrubs like this one, and they are about 2 hours away from this. You go from tropical forest to barren desert in a span of a 2 hour drive. 2 hours away from us in any direction. Not much difference, right? It's pretty crazy. And so Israel is a land of contrast and a land of wonder. So within 200 miles of each other are Mount Hermon and the Dead Sea. Mount Hermon is over 9,000 feet tall, and the Dead Sea is the lowest point on Earth at almost 1,300 feet below sea level. To give you some idea, Death Valley is the lowest point in the United States, and it's only 280 feet below sea level. So far, far lower is the Dead Sea, which looks like this. So in just a couple hundred miles, not even that, you go from this to this to this. What's the white stuff? salt mixed with other stuff. You don't want to, like, you know, scrape it up and put it on your food, because, you know, sulfur is just not really a good thing to ingest. But yeah, so you've got this varied geography. Then you also have a variety of crops. There's great diversity in the crops that can grow in Israel. In fact, on the coastal plains called the Plains of Sharon, they are famous for bananas, which is what these are, and for Haifa oranges as well. Galilee, you can grow just about anything in Galilee: grapes, olives, cucumbers, figs. Any vegetable you can imagine is grown in Galilee. In fact, God mentions this when he's getting ready to give the Israelites the land. He mentions this, the plentiful nature of the crops in Israel. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land of brooks of water, of fountains and springs, flowing out in the valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey, a land in which you will eat bread without scarcity, in which you will lack nothing, a land whose stones are iron, and out of whose hills you can dig copper. And you shall eat and be full, and you shall bless the Lord your God for the good land that he has given you. And indeed, there are pomegranates and other beautiful fruit and vegetables there. And God cares for this land. And nowhere else on the planet Earth do you have this much variety of food that can be grown in such a small area. And this is another example or evidence of God's care for Israel. But the land that you are going over to possess is a land of hills and valleys, which drinks water by the rain from heaven, a land that the Lord your God cares for. The eyes of the Lord your God are always upon it, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. No place on earth has so much history surrounding it as well, biblical history surrounding it as well. So we're going to talk about the political division of the land. There are three major areas in Israel, according to ancient Israel. The Israelites of Jesus' day would have said there were three major areas in Israel: Judea, Samaria, and Galilee. But was Israel autonomous in Jesus' day? Autonomous means you rule your own country. No. Who were they ruled by? The Romans. They were ruled by the Romans. And so the Romans carved up this area of land into three provinces. So these are the provinces that ruled during the time of Christ's ministry, these were the provinces of Roman rule in the time of Christ's ministry. The first one, three major areas. The first one was Judea and Samaria. So the first Roman province was Judea and Samaria. To the Israelites, those were two separate areas, but to the Romans, they were all part of one. During Christ's time, 7 different men ruled this area. It's a land of broken hills and valleys. It's good for grazing herds and flocks. And the city of Jerusalem was the natural focal point of the area. The city of Jerusalem is in Judea. You can see there. So that's the first province. The second province was Galilee and Perea. So you can see Galilee is here, and this is Perea, which actually is in Jordan now, and it's on the other side of the Jordan. It's in the country of Jordan now, but it was considered part of Israel then. And Galilee, of course, is where Jesus was raised, and Herod Antipas was the ruler of that area. It gets a lot of rain, about 25 inches a year from rainfall and from runoff from Mount Hermon, snow runoff. And then the last area was Iturea and Trachonitis, which Iturea was also known as Northern Galilee. Why are the borders not specific? The borders are not specific because it was primarily populated by nomads, by roaming people, so they didn't really have defined borders. It's like if you have a backyard and your neighbor has a backyard and nobody has a fence, where exactly is that, right? So there was no defined area. Sometimes when you build a fence, your neighbors get upset. It's 3 inches over on our side. So Philip, the tetrarch, who's mentioned in the scriptures, ruled this area. There's a fourth region that was technically not, or officially not, a Roman province, but it wasn't entirely autonomous either. There was some Roman control, but they had some autonomy as well. Oops, sorry. And that was Decapolis. Decapolis, Deca means 10, polis means city, so it was made up of 10 cities, and it was in this sort of peachy area of Israel.
What's the bottom part
What bottom part?
of Israel?
Oh, well, I'm not sure that was under Roman rule, or if it was part of what was south of Judea. I'm not sure. Decapolis, there have been some ancient coins found that indicate that they had some autonomy, but not complete autonomy. Now let's talk about the geography. This cutout is in your book. As you're looking at it, you are standing in the southern part and looking to the north. But this cutout moves from west to east. So on the western side, you have the Mediterranean, and then you have what's across from, this is the Jordan flowing into the Dead Sea, and then what's on the other side of the Jordan, on the other side of the Dead Sea. So we're going to talk about the geographical divisions. That you read about these in the book yesterday. And the first one is the coastal plain, and it shows you the where that lands. It can be 6 to 20 miles, depending on where you are in Israel. And it's fertile farmland. Coastal plains often are. In fact, some of the richest soil in the world is in those coastal plainlands. It's some of the most desirable land in Palestine, but there's not much of it because it's a very narrow area. From there, moving eastward, you come to the Shephelah, which are rolling hills. They're the central hills of Israel. Think if you've ever driven in the hills around the Mississippi River, kind of just rolling hills. It is also very good for growing things, olives and grapes and grain, but it's also used for farming sheep or oxen or cows or goats, pastoral farming. But one of the interesting things about the Shephelah was that in the Old Testament times, the Philistines lived in the coastal plain, and the Israelites lived in what are the Cisjordan Hills that we'll talk about in a minute. And the Shephelah was like a buffer zone between them, and it was very disputed whose land was that, and a lot of the battles took place in that disputed area. And then you have the Cisjordan Hills, and they are commonly associated with Israel's history. A lot of what happens both in the Old and New Testaments happens in this area. Jerusalem is there. In fact, most of Israel's cities are in the Cisjordan Hills. And the hills range from about 1,500 feet to 3,000 feet. They're higher in the north than they are in the south. And then if you go farther north into Lebanon, the mountains can rise to nearly 10,000 feet. And then you plummet downward into the Jordan Valley. It's a very steep descent. It's actually part of a huge continental rift that runs for 4,000 miles through that area. And we'll talk about that more tomorrow. And then moving farther eastward to the other side of the Jordan, which is the meaning of Transjordan, trans meaning across, and the Jordan River. Technically, it means the side opposite from the viewer's perspective, but if you're in Jerusalem, it's the side opposite from your perspective. So it's on the other side. And it's the East Bank area. And this is a plateau that rises quite quickly. It's about 1,300 feet in the north and about 3,900 higher than actually almost 4,000 feet in the south. So it's a plateau area. So you go down quickly and then you go up quickly as well. Okay, so here's what's gonna happen now. We're not done. We'll finish tomorrow, but I'm going to hand out to you your study guide. Your test is Tuesday. Your Unit 1 test is Tuesday. You have the rest of the hour to study and to work. When you are done, if you did not turn in your book yesterday, I need you to turn it in today, upside down on this table up here. Got it? Thanks.